to be here in this special event in which we honor the legacy and trajectory of one of our own faculty members, at which we like to call last lecture, neither because it is the last, nor strictly speaking a lecture, but because it wants to encapsulate the best and finest of the person that we honor this afternoon. To our lecturers, we ask three very simple questions. If granted the possibility to give a last lecture, what would you say? What wisdom would you impact to the world? What would you want as your legacy? As you can imagine, those simple questions require more than simple answers. They require and imply a subject who has devoted his or her life entirely to the pursuit of intellectual development, a subject who selflessly has committed to the core principle of Jesuit education, a subject, finally, who embodies in his or her job the service to others. Today, I have the honor and privilege to introduce Professor Emeritus Patrick Byrne. He joined the philosophy department in 1975, served as chair from 2003 to 2010, and as director of Boston College Lonergan Institute from 2011 to 2022. The associate director of the Jesuit Institute from 1997 to 2001, Professor Byrne also was a member of the University Core Development and Core Renewal Committees from 1991 to 2019, and a 10-year committee member of the Lilly Endowment Planning Grant on Undergraduate Student Vocations, which led to formation of Boston College Intersections program. Among many other campus roles, Professor Byrne was also the guiding force behind the Pulse Service Learning Program, which educates students for social justice. He served as inaugural director from 1969 to 1972, and as interim director in 2013 to 2014, and has taught in Pulse for more than 4 decades. In 1999, Professor Byrne received from Alpha Sigma Nu, National Jesuit Honor Society, its notable book award for his analysis and science in Aristotle. In 2017, the Ignatian Volunteer Corps, New England region, presented him with the Madonna de la Estrada Award in recognition of his founding of Pulse. And in 2019, during the university commencement ceremony, he received the St. Robert Bellarmine S.J. Award in recognition of his exemplary long-term dedication to the mission of the university. Do I need to provide more qualification to prove you his suitability for the last lecture? Probably not, but I'm sure we will learn more aspects and nuances about his life, his experience at Boston College, and his scholarship during his talk. So please join me with a round of applause to welcome Professor Pat Byrne, the 2004 last lecturer.
Well, thank you all so much. As Tomeo Barcelo can tell you, hi, Dada, my granddaughter. I was very reluctant to accept the invitation to give this talk, but Tomeo is such a nice guy, it's really hard to turn him down, so I did accept. But then when the public announcement of this as my last lecture came out, my former students started coming up to me with these kind of worried looks on their face. And they said, Professor Byrne, we heard you're giving your last lecture. Is everything okay? And in their worried eyes, I could see questions like, do you have some strange kind of illness that's taking away your powers of speech? Are you losing your cognitive faculties? are you, going to be with us? And so I would laugh with them and say, well, no, this is a lecture series. It's called The Last Lecture Series, and I've been asked to give it, so I'm fine. And then we had a total eclipse on Monday. And I got wondering if maybe my students knew something that I didn't know. Should I maybe not be following Little Orphan Annie's advice from the Broadway musical? Should I not be betting my bottom dollar that tomorrow there will be sun? Well, something about the last lecture has this ominous quality to it. So. But all kidding aside, I am very, very grateful to be honored in this way. And especially because it is a lecture series in which some people that I highly esteem, colleagues, have given the talk before. And this includes my good friends Karen Arnold and Jane Regan and Jim O'Toole and Claire O'Connor and Bob Taggart and Mark O'Connor, and especially Michael Himes and many others. So I'm very grateful to Tomeo and the Alpha Sigma Nu Society and everyone else for asking me to come here today to talk. So thank you so much. So for many years, I have been wondering about the meaning of unity in the university. That's why there's a question mark in my title, Unity in University. On the face of it, the word university is an oxymoron, a unity of diversity. And throughout its history, the ideal of an institution of higher learning that unifies diverse academic disciplines and practices has always been more of an aspiration than an actualization. Former president of the University of California system, Clark Kerr, proclaimed that it was time to abandon the quest for some unifying vision of the university. He regarded the evident lack of unity not as something to be lamented, but rather something to be celebrated. He proposed not only abandoning the quest, but even dispensing with the term university itself. In his famous Godkin lectures at Harvard University, Kerr proposed substituting instead multiversity in place of university. Kerr oversaw dramatic changes in California's system of higher education, and he celebrated the replacement of the antiquated notion of a university by this modern entity of a multiversity. He likened the multiversity to a city of infinite variety, filled with diverse opportunities, disciplines, and subcultures. Referring explicitly to John Henry Newman's idea of a university, Kerr disparaged the university as being more like a parochial village, a much more confining environment. By way of contrast, in the multiversity, he proclaimed, there is, quote, less a sense of community than in a village, but also less of a sense of confinement. There's less of a sense of purpose than within a town, but there are more ways to excel. In the multiversity, students will be more vocationally oriented, more drawn from all classes and races. Kerr endeavored to convince his audience to embrace this multiversity by using these images that appeal to the American love of open-ended freedom, and at the same time to disparage the ideal of a university as stodgy and parochial. Later in his lecture, he also extolled the multiversity for its accelerated production of new knowledge, which in turn accelerates the technological and economic growth of the nation. Kerr admitted that there would be losses to the community and purpose, but he held that the gains far outweighed the losses. Kerr's lectures were later published in a very influential book, The Uses of University, although his ideas were very controversial and received numerous criticisms. Some have even said that the earliest and most powerful criticisms of his multiversity ideal came in the form of the infamous student protests at Berkeley campus, where Kerr had recently been chancellor. In spite of the criticisms, I think Kerr's book and its vision became widely accepted, and in many ways gives an accurate description of most American universities today, a half-century later. In this sense, universities exist in name only, and are in fact a rather disparate collection of subcultures, what Bernard Lonergan would describe as coincidental aggregates, collections of things and events, whose only unity is that of occupying the same region of space during the same span of time, without any corresponding connections or shared sense of purpose. Today, Kerr's original way of advocating for the multiversity against a unified vision of the university receives additional reinforcement from postmodern celebrations of otherness and condemnations of any totalizing narrative. While Kerr rightly recognized that the older ways of maintaining unity in universities would no longer work for the vastly increased diversity of disciplines and community members, in my judgment, his preemptive abandonment of the quest has several serious shortcomings. Today, I would like to explore an alternative way of thinking about the unity of university. First, I'll review 7 challenges that I think any such vision has to address. Next, some reflections on efforts at Boston College to bring unity. Then I'll share something briefly about my own journey here at Boston College and what it has taught me about unity and university. Next, I'll explore the idea of unity not as some static, abstract concept, but as a dynamic and emerging unity. And then finally, I'll suggest that the unity of university lies not within the university itself, but in the dynamic emerging story of human and natural world in which the university participates and to which it contributes. I can think of 7 principal challenges to be faced in thinking about a genuine vision of unity of the diversities in contemporary universities. No doubt others can point out still further challenges. Be that as it may, each of the 7 alone, but especially when taken in combination with one another, pose a serious challenge for bringing about anything like the unity of a university. First, there's the vast diversity of disciplines in universities. There were really only 4 major disciplines in the original medieval universities: law, medicine, theology, and arts, which actually in those days meant natural philosophy and logic. Prior to the 20th century, in the earliest humanistic colleges in Europe and the United States, there were only 7 disciplines. Today, Boston College has 33 diverse academic departments in its 9 different schools and colleges. The number of disciplines is even greater at other universities. What do they have to do with one another? What do they have in common? Or is the university just a convenient location in which diverse people come to do their own work? Second, not only is there a vastly more number of disciplines in today's universities than in the original universities, the number of departments and subspecialties keep multiplying. This is built into the very nature of modern scientific and academic research itself. Each stage of investigation brings to light new data and new questions and new ideas, calling for ever more sophisticated methods and instruments, which in turn produce ever more subspecialties. This is currently taking place at a stunning pace in the biological, health, environmental, and cognitive sciences, but it's no less true in other areas such as economics and literature and the arts, mathematics, and even philosophy and theology. Within these specializations, many subspecialties continue to arise, so much so that subspecialties have to find interlocutors outside of their own universities, because even colleagues in the same department do not really understand what they are doing. While this expansion of knowledge is laudable, it does raise the question of what concept of unity could possibly provide a unifying vision for a dynamically changing and ever-specializing growth in universities. No static concept or plan of unity could meet that challenge. Third, one traditional answer to the unity of university was teaching and formation of undergraduate students. Prior to the 20th century, almost all universities were founded by religious denominations, first in the Islamic world, then later in Catholic universities in medieval Europe, and then in the great Protestant universities in the United States, followed later by Catholic and Jewish universities. The religious vision of the founding denominations and orders supplied the unifying vision for these universities. The disciplines in their ordering were framed by the religious intention, forming the moral character of their students, who would then provide moral leadership in the world at large. But the rise of modern science and scholarship has seriously eroded that vision of the university. In his book, Exiles from Eden, intellectual historian Mark Twain has presented a powerful formulation of the problem. He draws attention to the commonplace of academic life, what he calls the mysterious complaint, "I don't have enough time to do my own work." If the work of teaching and mentoring students is not the faculty's own work, Twain asks, then whose work is it? Twain observes that the university faculty have come to regard cutting-edge research alone as what is properly their own work. He argues that even prior to Clark Kerr, Max Weber's essay, Science as Vocation, gave a highly influential new vision of the unity of the university. According to Twain, because belief in God no longer seemed intellectually tenable or respectable to Weber, something like a substitute religious commitment would be necessary to sustain the anxious and lonely dedication to academic specialization and methodical rigor. Weber, therefore, quote, had to invest the concept of beruf, vocation, with a meaning that the term never had before him, namely, that the fate of the faculty's souls depended upon the possession of firm and reliable methods. As Twain observes, mastery of the world and self-mastery were interconnected in this Weberian vision of academic vocation, and method in Weber's sense was the means to that mastery. This divergent vision has competed powerfully with the vision of student teaching and formation as a meaning for the unity of university. Now, the conflict in universities between research on the one hand and teaching and student formation on the other has a centuries-long history that predates even Max Weber. The late Jesuit historian John O'Malley documented the virtually unresolvable tension between the two missions of universities. According to O'Malley, the medieval Western universities began to emerge in the 11th and 12th centuries, and they shared a unity of purpose that was, according to O'Malley, radically secular. As he put it, the university qua university did not concern itself with the salvation of souls, with the well-being of the church, or with the student's personal formation. Rather, from the beginning, according to O'Malley, the medieval universities concerned themselves with intellectual problem solving in all four of their divisions, law, medicine, theology, and the arts. This intellectual problem solving provided the basis upon which universities equipped students with knowledge and skills that would enhance their upward mobility in professional worlds. O'Malley went on to explain that a second opposing tradition of education began to emerge with the founding of the humanistic schools and colleges around the middle of the 15th century. This rival tradition competed with universities for some of the same group of advantaged male students. These schools' objective was to develop the imagination of their students. The study of great literature from the authors of ancient Greece and Rome provided examples of virtues to be emulated, which were written in a style that provided inspiration to live according to those virtues. The ultimate goal of this style of education was to form students for service to the common good, not just to professions, and to become leaders skilled in rhetoric so as to be able to persuade people, whether in the state or in the church, to follow them in pursuit of virtuous causes that they espoused. O'Malley went on to trace the rather unique efforts of Jesuits to form universities that united both educational traditions, although he insisted that significant tensions between formative humanistic education and advanced research continue to the present, even in Jesuit universities. One way this shows up at Boston College is in our 2 or more tier faculty system, where research is prioritized for tenure-track faculty, while teaching and student formation are the priorities for professors of the practice. Fortunately, Boston College still does expect excellence in teaching from its tenure faculty as well. But the priority given to research tends to mean that excellence in teaching of specializations, not formation of whole persons. Moreover, while the contributions of professors of the practice to the formation of undergraduate students is of extraordinary value, nevertheless, these faculty members do not share in all the decision-making to which tenure-track faculty do have access. The tensions that O'Malley narrated remain an ongoing challenge for us even here at Boston College. BC, along with a number of other universities, claims to aspire to educate the whole person. Yet even at such universities, there are numerous faculty members and even students who regard their institutions as little more than convenient locations in which to conduct their own work. This means that there remains a considerable challenge to find a proper unity that genuinely embraces both research specialization along with teaching students and forming students. A fourth challenge to thinking about the unity of the university is in the challenge and the tension between the humanistic education of the whole person on the one hand and preparation for employment on the other. The implicit, but perhaps the most widely accepted answer to the question of unity in the university is jobs. A major factor in recruiting students for a university's success is their success in placing graduates into jobs. Almost all private universities depend heavily on enrollments for their economic survival. Even public universities will suffer funding cuts if enrollments drop. Hence, the presence of diverse disciplines in the university is heavily influenced by the vast diversity of available jobs and the diversity of human needs in our increasingly complex society. This pressure on the university stands in tension with the university's heritage of humanistic education, humanistic whole person education. While O'Malley pointed out that originally both university and humanistic education did prepare students for certain roles in society, there are other dimensions of humanistic liberal arts education that have always stood in a certain tension with the prevailing priorities of society. Philosophy, theology, history, literature, and art, and the social sciences all call into question assumptions about what it means to be a human being and about the best way to live. Education devoted to raising questions about these issues and answers they suggest often stand as obstacles to or in tension with preparing students to fit into already defined social and economic roles. Some of our students say, with pride, that Boston College has ruined them for life. May have heard that. Meaning that it made them seek more in their lives than can be provided by the unexamined economic and social rewards offered by most job opportunities. This raises the question of whether there can be a notion of unity of the university that values education of the whole person and at the same time prepares students for economic roles in society. Fifth, there's a parallel challenge for unity of the university posed by the tensions between research that serves the needs of societies and research that examines and evaluates the societies themselves. A key line from the Boston College mission statement reads that BC pursues its mission by producing nationally and internationally significant research that advances insight and understanding, thereby both enriching culture and addressing important social needs. But much university research is indeed funded by government agencies, foundations, and corporations, which determine what questions will be pursued. In this way, university research serves society's needs by feeding its research findings back to society, at least as those needs are perceived by the funding institutions. Such funding stimulates relatively short-term research programs, but it also exerts significant influence on the longer-term development, continuation, and prioritization of disciplines, departments, and programs within the university. This is especially true in departments where securing funding impacts faculty hiring and promotion. But on the other hand, research incentives provided by external funders can marginalize both pure research and critical research. Pure research pursues questions that do not have any obvious benefit to societies. Critical research asks questions about the practices and cultural assumptions of the societies themselves. Is there a way of thinking about the unity of university that gives proper place to serving social needs while at the same time serving society by calling into question the shortcomings of its fundamental assumptions and priorities? Sixth, today the word diversity in universities is most frequently thought of in association with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Students, faculty, and staff populations now grow increasingly to reflect the diversities of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, physical and mental abilities, class and political convictions in our society. Of course, this has not always been the case. For almost all their history, universities, excepting historically black universities, enrolled predominantly, often almost exclusively, white male students. Until 1972, only 2 of the 4 undergraduate colleges at Boston College enrolled women. In 1968, there were only 13 African American students, graduate as well as undergraduate, here at BC. And BC was typical of most non-historically black universities across the United States. Initially, Boston College and most other universities sought to address this injustice by seeking to admit a greater diversity of students. But it turned out that merely admitting a diversity of students and priding itself for doing so left a great many questions of unity unresolved. Until the 1960s, in the US at least, students, faculty, and staff were incorporated into the life of universities and their reward and promotion systems in ways that were taken over from the founding religious denominations and from society at large. But society at large, and even most religious denominations, were largely segregated by race and marginalized participation of women. More recently, society and the university struggled to respond fairly to the diversity of sexual orientation and abilities. Merely bringing a diversity of students, faculty, and students onto the same piece of campus land does not automatically yield unity. The social and cultural structures that once supported the learning and formation of white male students had to be modified and expanded, which BC has endeavored to address over many decades in the Thea Bowman Ahana and Intercultural Center and programs, in the McNair Scholars Program, and in the Pine Manor Institute and several other initiatives. The challenges of achieving genuine unity of diversity in our society has migrated into and become the challenges within the universities, both in terms of the student formation and teaching, and is posing questions for university research. Careful academic research regarding the legacy of slavery in the United States is one of vital importance today. The addition of the goals of equity, inclusion, and belonging to the goal of greater diversity reflects the most recent attempts to come to terms with these challenges. These are important steps toward a more dynamic unity in the university, but much still remains to be done. Seventh, the religious vision of the founding denominations and order once provided a strong vision of unity for universities. But as historians George Marson, Philip Gleason, Father William Leahy, Jim O'Toole, and many others have shown, as modern research disciplines began to play ever greater roles in universities, particularly in the natural sciences and especially in evolutionary biology, this posed challenges that the founding visions of unity were not able to meet successfully. Increasing secularization, first in Europe and more recently in the United States, is due in part to the failure of universities to find authentic ways of relating religious faith and the dynamisms of academic research. This failure has led to the presumption that religious claims should play no role in universities, a la Max Weber, because the claims of religion cannot be proven by the evidence and methods of modern empirical research. These methods, after all, provided the rationales for the universities of Weber, Kerr, and most universities today. But there's no empirical scientific research that has or can establish that scientific research is the only kind of authentic knowledge. So there is really a question that has been banished from rather than answered by universities. And so I ask, is there a vision of the unity of university that can commit itself to empirical evidential research and simultaneously take seriously and pursue rigorously the questions that arise out of people's religious experiences, practices, and beliefs? Like most universities, Boston College is still challenged by these tensions arising out of the many diversities. Yet BC has endeavored to grapple with the questions of unity in admirable and somewhat unique ways. A great many members of the Boston College community have worked hard to develop thoughtful programs that bring faculty, staff, and students from diverse disciplines and backgrounds to work together on common topics and problems. Especially today, I want to lift up Father Joseph Appleyard, to whom we said goodbye just 2 days ago. He contributed so much to our university. We're indebted to him especially for his leadership as the Vice President for Mission and Ministry, where, out of his own religious faith, he made those of different faiths, or no faith at all, feel welcomed and accepted at this university. He also inaugurated the intersections and halftime programs and authored the Pocket Guide for Jesuit Education and the Journey to Adulthood that have inspired so many conversations about who and what we are as a university. In addition to the many contributions of Father Appleyard, other unique initiatives here toward building unity include the Pulse Program for Service Learning, the 4-year Perspectives Program, the innovative University Core Renewal program of interdisciplinary collaborations, interdisciplinary majors such as African and African diaspora studies, international studies, environmental studies, human-centered engineering, managing for social impact and the common good. Vice Provost Akua Sar's Courageous Conversations About Race, Global Health and the Common Good, Medical Humanities, Health and Culture, Women and Gender Studies, the Center for Christian and Jewish Learning, the Program for Islamic Civilizations and Societies, and many more. Just this past week, the BC webpage featured a collaboration between an engineering professor and nursing graduate students. All these programs have brought faculty and staff into collaborative conversations, teaching, and planning. They bring together students from very different majors and personal backgrounds who contribute their fledgling ideas into dialogues with other students and faculty and staff from different disciplinary perspectives. I personally have been privileged to participate in several of these programs. They've been to me very personally rewarding. Yet I think we all agree that in the face of so much diversity, there's a need for still much more to be done. So I cannot accept Clark Kerr's dismissal of the idea of unity of university, because for me, these questions are not merely academic or institutional. They're also very personal. I came to Boston College as a first-year student almost 60 years ago. It would be fair to say that at that time, I was a collection of fragments. I came to BC with a passion for science, a passion for justice, and an encounter with the love of God that vitalized my immature Catholic religious faith. I did not really understand much about any of these three directions in my life. Fortunately, through my courses at Boston College in physics and theology, I began to understand these fragmentary interests more deeply. In addition, I was helped to form deeper connections between my faith and my passion for justice through my participation in the Sodality of Mary, which at that time was the major source of social justice, social and racial justice activities here at BC campus. I was mentored by Jesuits and upper-level students that I met there, and that eventually grew into the Pulse program. However, I really had almost no thoughts at all about what these passions had to do with one another. It's certainly fair to say that my interests were fragmentary and lacked any real unity. Because of that, my commitment to each of them was tenuous and vulnerable to many distractions. Prior to enrolling in Boston College, I had no knowledge whatsoever about philosophy. But from my very first course, I was powerfully drawn to that subject. There I began to discover connections among the issues that were so important to me. I was therefore very much looking forward to a course in philosophy of science, which at that time, because it was an upper-level elective, I could not take until my junior year. It focused on the work done by philosophers of science in the first half of the 20th century. But I was sorely disappointed in the way that those thinkers approached the philosophy of science. Fortunately, at the same time, I was enrolled in a course with Father Joseph Flanagan, who would become my lifelong mentor. He introduced me to the thought of Bernard Lonergan. Initially, I understood very little of Lonergan's thought, but his philosophy spoke to what mattered to me most about science: the wonder about the universe, the challenge of questions begging for solutions, the excitement of discovery. Later, I would discover that Lonergan also had an understanding of the unity of science, religion, and social justice that would continue to nourish my intellectual as well as my spiritual quest for wholeness. Boston College's commitment to humanistic education was instrumental in helping me to gradually pull the intellectual and ethical fragments of my life together. I was also fragmented in still other ways when I arrived at the BC campus. I had unresolved personal issues that I did not even know that I had. Providentially, another mentor, Weston Jenks, founder of the University Counseling Services, won my trust and helped me to bring those broken parts of my soul into a healed wholeness. I also came to Boston College with a passion for teaching and soon aspired to teach at the university level. When I was fortunate enough to be hired back here to teach at my alma mater, I of course had to face the publish or perish imperative. And so in order to do the teaching that I loved, I forced myself to publish, only to discover, to my astonishment, that I liked it. I liked researching and writing, and I actually had some things that I thought were worth contributing to scholarly conversations. So it was also a surprise to me to discover that I found a unity between my teaching and my research. Almost all of my publications have come out of my teaching, and my teaching has been enriched and deepened by my research. This, of course, is the ideal that Boston College and many other universities do profess, and it has worked out for me personally. The community of Boston College helped me to start bringing together into a unity some of my own life. This was a gift that I received from my BC friends, my many teachers, mentors, and fellow students, my colleagues in the philosophy department and the Lonergan Institute, and my many friends from across the university. There are also countless other stories like my own, where commitments to teaching, mentoring, and student formation at Boston College likewise helped many other students begin their own personal journeys toward wholeness, although none of us will reach complete unity in this life. The question of unity was also a very personal question for Bernard Lonergan himself. This is something that neither I nor other students of Lonergan's thought knew about him until after his death. We discovered that in his early days of his formation in the Society of Jesus, Lonergan wrote an amazing essay which was not made public until years after he died. As a young man, Lonergan was inspired to write that essay by St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, which sets forth a stunning vision of Christ as unifier. In all wisdom and insight, God has made known to us the mystery of God's will in accord with the favor that he set forth, a plan for the fullness of times, to bring together all things in Christ, in heaven and on earth. Just a few years later, in the 1930s, Lonergan would be a doctoral student in Rome. There in the streets of Rome, he witnessed the horror of the rise of the fascisti and their different grotesque vision of unity that would overcome all diversity and conflict. As their party's doctrine of fascism puts it, the conception of the state is all-embracing. Outside of it, no human or spiritual values can exist, much less have value. The fascist state is a synthesis and a unit inclusive of all values, interprets, develops, and potentiates the whole life of a people. Lonergan would spend the next 50 years of his career trying to give articulation to a radically different vision of unity, inspired by St. Paul, in stark opposition to anything that even remotely resembled the fascist reliance on political power as the way to bring about unity. Lonergan took St. Paul's phrase, all things, to mean the totality of all the actions performed by every human being in the whole course of human history. He discerned an unarticulated yearning for wholeness and unity winding through the historical succession of human actions. That yearning reveals itself in the countless ways that human beings respond creatively to their circumstances. That creativity comes about as the deeds of people near us and those who came before us give rise to questions for us. Questions about why they did what they did and what it meant. Questions about what we can and should do in response. Human creativity consists in the quest for genuine answers to those and other such questions, and in the subsequent actions taken on the basis of authentic answers. Such answers and actions produce technological advances that improve health and the material standards of living. But even more importantly, they also produce insights into better ways of living and working together and forming ever more just communities. Such insights arise out of conversations among people as they search for better answers. In this way, the creative strand of human history brings about a kind of unity as later actions build upon the achievements that came before. The careful pursuit of questions and answers not only builds upon the achievements of human beings that came before us, it also builds upon what the universe had been doing billions of years before the emergence of human beings. Lonergan also took seriously another St. Paul's sayings, that all creation is groaning in labor pains, even until now, in anticipation of the unity to come. From Lonergan's penetrating reflections on modern science, he came to see that the universe is also a sequence where later things and processes build upon those that came before. Prior to the emergence of human beings, the universe itself exhibits an emerging unity, which human beings continue through their creative actions. But the emerging unity of the natural and human worlds can only continue as long as the succession of human actions maintains its creativity by paying attention to the questions that call out for answers, devoting energy to finding genuine answers, and acting on the basis only of good answers. Only in this way do the interactions between the human and natural environments move toward an authentic unity. Tragically, of course, human history and its interactions with the natural world have not been an uninterrupted flow of creativity in search of a more perfect union. The yearning to creatively build unity is betrayed in the countless ways that human beings ignore and arbitrarily dismiss questions about how to best build upon the past. The vast diversity and unresolved tensions in the world give rise to so many questions for understanding and cooperation. It takes so much time to respond creatively and reflectively to such questions. Fear, anxiety, greed, pride, anger, hatred engender impatience with how long it takes to reach genuine answers. We pursue questions that will benefit ourselves while simultaneously ignoring and dismissing questions about the needs and circumstances of others and of our natural environment. People are drawn instead to simple answers that promise to bring about quick solutions, finding scapegoats to blame for their frustrations and ills, and eventually toward violence and violent force to impose simple answers and punish scapegoats. And this violence is directed not only against others, but against our very own selves as well. Instead of bringing about genuine unity, violence only drives unresolved questions and conflicts underground, where they fester until they resurface in new forms. Instead of a purely creative emerging unity, human history is radically broken, and its legacy has been far from the unity which human beings aspire to in their deepest selves. I learned that from Lonergan that this brokenness, the authentic unity of human diversity and conflict, cannot come from any conceptual scheme or system or plan of political party or vanguard organization. Rather, the unity of humanity in the natural world is the dynamically emerging unity itself. It's not some last stage in history whose then residents will look back and say, thank you all very much for the sacrifices and suffering and deaths that you all endured, so that we may now enjoy the paradise that you made for us. The emerging unity of the whole is the wholeness of the whole story, in which each individual and human action makes a meaningful and indispensable contribution. It's a story which cannot have its meaningful unity without the contribution of each and every one of those actions. We will not and cannot know what the wholeness of that story is until every human being's contributions have been made and the story has been told in its fullness through the combined contributions of each and every one of its actors. The emerging unity of this humanity is a story in which creative achievements, but also tragedy and suffering, play essential roles. It's a story in which injustices, breakdowns, and sufferings, as much as achievements and healings, are indispensable parts of the whole story. Tragedies and sufferings are passed along, awaiting for responses that will address them fully and properly and heal the story into a genuine wholeness. While he professed that he did not know the whole story, inspired by St. Paul, Lonergan believed that the wholeness we yearn for would be fulfilled. He believed that the power of love, as carried forth by those who love and forgive, will ultimately bring the unity human beings yearn for, a unity that Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community, a unity in which every tear will be wiped away, in the words of the book of Revelation. Lonergan described the human and cosmic story as upwardly but indeterminately directed. He went on to observe that the emergent unity means not merely a dynamism, but a directed dynamism. It neither denies nor minimizes such facts as entropy, cataclysm, or the death that follows every birth, the extinction that threatens every survival. It offers no opinion on the ultimate fate of the universe, but it insists that the negative picture is not the whole picture. This is a stunning claim. It means that the future completion of the unity of the universe depends in an indispensable way on what human beings do. It depends on their growing knowledge. It depends on their growth of their willingness to do what is good and bring good out of evil. It depends on what they do on the basis of the knowledge and willingness, not only individually, but in common collaborations. I would say that the unity of the university is not an abstract concept of some common, lowest common denominator of the various diversities that make up the university. I would say it's not some grand system, some grand set of algorithms or formulas. The unity of the university is not in the university. It's what the university is in and what it participates in and what it contributes to. The university has a special role. Universities engage all kinds of questions that are not engaged by any other part of our society. Universities take on questions that seem to have no immediate practical or political or economic consequences to them. They engage with peoples and places and cultures that seem to be, at best, remotely relevant to the lives of students and faculty members. What universities do is play a special role of gathering data in from this emerging unity of the human and cosmic story, and letting all that information pose questions that are sought by collaborations among faculty and in conversations in hallways and in residence halls and over coffee, and on the basis of coming up with not always the firm answer but the best answer, feeding that back into the world so as to make the indispensable contributions to the emerging unity of the university, or of the universe and the human story that only universities can make because of their concern to follow the lead of any questions. The university at its best, every question matters, everything matters. And I think that by thinking about the unity of the university not as something that is contained within the university, that some answer only to the university, but the unity of the university as the unity to which it contributes by bringing it about, has a very powerful, important lesson for all of us. Because for many of us, sometimes in the classroom, from the less than engaged looks on the faces of some of our students, we wonder, what's the point to this? And for those of us who are engaged in the publisher parish, is that article ever going to be read by anybody? Is it just going to is my book going to gather dust on the shelves of the library? But we do it to the extent to which we take seriously our call to ask and answer questions, and to do so with the help and the communal cooperation with our students and our fellows, and not just our fellow faculty members, but our fellow staff members, that we bring something back to society that only university can do. Now, that's not to say that every university does this. And it's not to say that every university epoch does this. Certainly lots of university epochs and certainly lots of universities screen out questions and can do so for decades or even centuries. But the other thing, but the questions tend not to go away, and there's something about being formed in a way that at least I was formed here at Boston College, to take every question seriously and to not be satisfied with anything that less than a genuine answer is what is uniquely important about the unity of the university, because it's contributing to a university of which it is a part, of which we are a part. And none of this can be done without love. Students fall in love with their subjects, and it's the love that has the power of pushing them through that loneliness that Weber said is what people engaged in academic research have to endure. It's the love of the subject, but I think the extent to which we also think of it as the love of a whole, a unity that's emerging over which we do not know the answer of what it's going to be, but with a knowledge and perhaps a belief that by acting seriously, engaging those questions and engaging one another, that we're going to make a difference in how that story turns out. And so these are some of the thoughts that I have come to in answer to this, for me at least, vexing question about what's the unity of the university. And I hope that they help you also think things about your roles in the university, whether you be student or staff or faculty member. And so I thank you very much for the privilege of being able to come to talk to you today.